Greetings, Nick Bowcott with Sweetwater here, and today we're going to discuss the inverted power chord. Now, what is an inverted power chord? Literally what it says it is. It's a power chord flipped. Now, a power chord, as you probably know, is just two notes, the root and the fifth, and the root is always lower than the fifth, and the root is the name of the chord. So an A5 power chord, the root is A. Got it? The other note is the fifth, hence A5. Now, to invert it, what you do is this. You flip it so the root is actually not the lowest note, the fifth is, hence the name inversion. The two most commonly used power chord shapes in rock and heavy metal are these. I'll start by playing the shape which has the root on the low E string. I'm going to play a G5, so the third fret is G, so this is where I'm going to place my shape, and it's just that, the root and the fifth, and this is what it sounds like. And the other commonly used power chord shape is one with the root on the A string. So I'm going to play a D5. So as D is the fifth fret on the A string, this is my D5. And once again, root and fifth. Simple stuff. That explained, let's invert the G5 power chord with the root on the low E string. Now, the only way to do that actually is to get rid of the lowest note, which is the root. And that might seem counterintuitive or counterproductive, because doesn't that take away the power of the chord, the power chord? And the answer is nah, because the resulting thing, as you're about to hear, has a mood to it, has a dark vibe to it. And the bottom line, if you're worried about the low end, it's called a bass player, folks. He's in your band, use him. Make sure you can hear him, he can play the root. Got it? So what we're going to do to invert our G5 power chord is this. Remove the low root and play it an octave higher, which would be at the fifth fret on the D string. And what that does is it puts both notes, the low fifth and the root, both at the fifth fret, which means I can play it with one finger, which means none more simple. Hurrah! This is what the result sounds like, the inverted G5 power chord with the fifth lower than the root. Like I said, it has a dark vibe to it, and the one finger playing, that's kind of cool because it makes it simple, and for a player like me, that's always good. Now, let's do the same thing with a power chord with the root on the A string. Now, there are two ways I can do this on this particular power chord. I can do what I've just done, which is remove the low root and play it an octave higher, and that will give me a one finger chord at the seventh fret. So this is my inverted D5 chord played that way. Now, this particular one finger shape is used all the time. Not only is it easy to play, it sounds ominous, and if you're playing in A, it means you can pedal the A root as well, which is really, really cool. So you'll hear it all the time in riffs like this. Now, the second way we can invert this particular power chord with the root on the A string is this. We can leave the root where it is, and because we've got nothing on the low E string, we can take the fifth an octave lower. So in this particular case, I'm going to end up with a one-fingered chord at the fifth fret, and it's going to sound really, really dark. Check it out. Yeah, that works for me. And if I want, I can play all four strings. So I can play fifth, root, an octave fifth, and an octave root, and end up with something pretty ominous sounding. Check it out. Right, boring theory lesson over. Let's get on to some classic rock and metal riffs that use inverted chord shapes. We're going to start with one of the most famous riffs of all time, and it's a riff most people learn first or second when they start playing, and invariably, if they're like me, they play it wrong initially because they'll play it with regular power chords, and that's not how it's played. It's written by an English guy, his name is Richie Blackmore, and it's called Smoke on the Water. And here is how you play it wrong. Sounds pretty cool, but it's wrong. Now here's another way you can play it wrong with power chords. Same power chords, just slightly different positions. Here goes. Once again, sounds pretty good, but it's wrong. And I'm using far too much distortion, by the way. He doesn't use that much gain, but I just want to show you how to play it wrongly, so why not play it with the wrong sound as well? Now, this is how you play it correctly. You remove the low root and just play the fifth and the root with the root an octave higher, so it's inverted. I'm sure you'll agree that sounds much closer to the original. Like I said, I'm using too much gain and I don't play as well as Mr. Blackmore, but that's good enough for me, good enough for rock and roll, as they say. So inverted power chords. And what's interesting is this: when I was researching this, I found an interview with Ritchie and he revealed the following. What inspired this riff was actually an inversion of sorts. He took Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and flipped it, inverted it. So there you have it. Inverted chords used on an inversion of a classic symphony. Brilliant. That said, let's get on to something a little bit more metal. We're going to start with a band called Metallica, who sold a few records, and we're going to look at a riff from a song called Seek and Destroy from their debut album, Kill 'Em All. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play the riff first with regular power chords. Close, but not quite right. What we're going to do is this. We're going to do a counterintuitive move, get rid of the low root on the G and the A power chords, and see what happens. Here goes. That's more like it. It sounds a lot darker, a lot more ominous, a lot more moody. And the cool thing about it too is it's much easier to play because I don't have to move my hand horizontally like I was with the power chords. I can just leave it in one position. Check it out. Works for me. Now let's look at another riff from another famous metal act, and to do that I'm going to change guitars. This next riff is from Megadeth, and it's one of my favorite of their many great riffs. It's from Reckoning Day, and what it basically is a pedaled low E chugged with a chromatic descent of power chords from A to G sharp to G. This is what it sounds like with regular power chords, not the inversion. Nah, that's not even close in my humble opinion. So let's do the same thing again. Kind of a cardinal sin. Remove the lowest notes from the three power chords, invert them, and see what happens. Here we go. Sold. Next up is a riff from another one of the big four, the Mighty Slayer. And this one is taken from a song that's been a staple of their live set for years. It's called Mandatory Suicide. I'm going to play it first using a regular C-sharp 5 power chord. Let's see what it sounds like. No, that's not sinister enough, so let's do the same thing. But this time, because we've got a chord with the root note on the A string, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to put the fifth an octave lower, and I'm just going to play it with one finger at the fourth fret. Let's see if that simple maneuver conjures up the desired sinister effect, shall we? Here goes. Another metal riff master who used the inverted power chord shape to wonderful effect is the late, great Dimebag Darrell. He used it amazingly in Walk, and we're going to look at that in part 2 of this 2-part series. But right now we're going to look at what he did in Revolution Is My Name off the Reinventing the Steel album. What he does in this particular song is he uses 2 power chords, a C5 and a D sharp 5, to link the pre-chorus and the chorus. What I'm going to do first is play the end of the pre-chorus into the chorus using just regular power chords, and let's see what it sounds like, shall we? Oh, before I play though, I should point out this. When Darryl recorded this masterpiece, he used the guitar tuned down a whole step. In fact, he was slightly lower than D because that was his penchant. But I'm going to play it on a guitar tuned to regular tuning so you don't have to scurry around retuning or getting two guitars. So here it is with regular power chords. The pre-chorus sounded right, the chorus sounded right, or at least the best of my meager ability, but the link, not dark enough. So let's do what we did with Slayer, take the fifth octave lower. In fact, what we're going to do is play 3 or 4 strings to really give it some chunk. So here's the same thing, but with an inverted C5 and D sharp 5 power chord. Let's go. Now we're talking. Right, so far we've looked at 5 riffs, 1 from Deep Purple, 1 from Pantera, and then 3 from the Big 4. But if there's only 3, it means we've missed one. And we can't forget Anthrax. This might be my favorite illustration of just how effective the inverted power chord can be. This is the intro riff to Be All End All, and here's what it sounds like when you play it with regular root 5th power chords. That actually sounded pretty moody, but you know what? It's close, but definitely no carrot. So let's see what happens when we invert the chords. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to do exactly what we did with Pantera and Slayer. We're going to move the 5th onto the low E string. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit 3 or 4 strings as well. So let's give this bad boy a go with some low 5th action. Now we're talking. In fact, to really illustrate just how effective this simple maneuver is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it back to back. First time using regular power chords, then switching to the inversion. Here we go. No question who won that one, inverted all the way. Right, so far we've looked at one of the most famous riffs of all time, plus a riff each from the Big 4 and the mighty Pantera as well. But by the way, the inverted power chord is not just good for crunchy, driven metal stuff, it's also good, believe it or not, for clean sounds. And to illustrate that, I'm going to do something which I'm truly not worthy of, and that's play some Jimi Hendrix. And just so you know, the only similarity between myself and Mr. Hendrix is the left-handed bit. The man was a legend, I'm merely a leg end, but I'm going to give it my best shot. So I'm going to play the start of The Wind Cries Mary, and I'm going to first play it using regular power chords for the first chromatic ascent. Meager playing aside doesn't sound quite right, does it? So let's do what I said was missing and invert those first 3 chords. Here we go. And there you have it, folks. That's the end of part 1 of our look into inverted power chords. In part 2, we'll scratch the surface even deeper. We'll get into some more Blackmore, some more Pantera, some more Metallica, even some Accept, some Queensryche, and some other good stuff too. But hopefully this little scratch has given you an idea of what you can do. And if you've never tried these before, give it a whirl, because they're pretty cool. I'm out. See ya!